I never have to change lenses, and I always have the best lens mounted on the camera. So what's wrong with that? Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And once again, I'm out here on the streets of Kuala Lumpur taking some pictures on my Ricoh GR3X camera. And this camera, along the regular GR3, are my favorite cameras. But regardless of that, in this video I'm going to share 5 good alternatives for this and the GR3. And the reason for this is that I get these questions all the time from you guys. You ask me what would be a good alternative for the GR3 or the GR3X. The GR3 and the 3X are often criticized for 3 main reasons. First is the price, it's too expensive, and the second is the lens. It has only a fixed prime lens, no zoom or no interchangeable lenses, and there is no viewfinder. And for those reasons, some of you are not happy and you are looking for something similar, but also something that would have either lower price, viewfinder or interchangeable lenses. But before I share my list of alternatives, let me defend the GR3 and 3X a little. First of all is the price. And I kind of understand it. About 1,000 euros or dollars, it is a lot of money. But for that money you'll get an excellent prime lens and a camera body. And no matter which new camera body and new high quality prime lens you buy, you'll end up buying pretty much the same amount of money, if not even more. So from that viewpoint, the price is actually not that bad. And then there is the fixed lens thing, which I can't see as a downside, no matter how I look at it. First of all, I never have to change lenses, and I always have the best lens mounted on the camera. So what's wrong with that? And why would I want to carry many lenses with me anyway? They would only weigh me down, they would only slow me down because I would end up spending my time with the lenses instead of observing what is happening around me and getting some great shots. The lack of viewfinder is a downside, I agree, but I would not want to have a bigger camera for the sake of a viewfinder. Instead, I would like to have an external viewfinder that I could mount on the hot shoe of this camera. These current cameras don't have the required contacts for that, but I wish that in the future iteration of the GR, if there's ever going to be one, Ricoh would rectify that and give us an external accessory viewfinder, electronic viewfinder for their cameras. Anyway, let's now get to the list of alternatives. And this is of course my list, and I probably forgot something, so please feel free to fill in your alternatives in the comments down below. Number 1, a tiny micro four thirds camera body with a tiny lens. Like one of those Lumix GX series cameras or GM series cameras or Olympus pen cameras. Some of those are really tiny, and if you combine that with a tiny prime lens, you'll get a really compact, capable combination. And those are all system cameras, so if you're not sure what lens to use, you can mount any lens on those cameras from super wide angle to super telephoto. Of course, the handling is heavily compromised if you mount a big and heavy lens on one of those cameras, but you can do that if you want. I have used many of these tiny micro four thirds cameras. I currently own the GX880, which is not with me here in Kuala Lumpur, it's back in Finland. Those cameras can be really a lot of fun, and you can certainly make good pictures with them, and those would also be one good affordable option, because some of those, especially those older tiny micro four thirds cameras can be had for very little money second hand. Number 2, the Fuji X100. There are several versions of that camera, and some of the early versions can be had for a low price, second hand. I understand the latest version, the X100V, is kind of hard to come by. There are some supply problems, and it's in back order almost everywhere. I have used some versions of the X100 and I like them a lot, every one of them. Some of the early ones have a little bit quirky autofocus, but somehow I think it only adds character to that camera. And I also like the very first version, even though sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating to use. It's a fixed lens camera. It has a 35mm equivalent f2 lens. It also has a viewfinder, very nice hybrid viewfinder. You can choose optical, electronic, or combination of those two, which adds a lot of usability and flexibility in bright light. There's a big APS-C sensor inside, and the image quality is fantastic on all versions of the X100, and you simply have to love those Fuji colors. However, it is kind of big and heavy compared to the GR. But it is still one alternative if you don't mind about the fixed lens. Number 3 is another Fuji, the XF10. I have never used the camera. I know very little about the camera, but it has a fixed 28mm equivalent f2.8 lens, APS sensor, and Fuji image quality, which is a lot already. And it is kind of close to the GR in many ways. It's quite compact. It has the same equivalent focal length as the GR3. And it has a fixed screen, no viewfinder, but it has a built-in flash, and that can be useful in some scenarios. So I think the XF10 might be a good alternative, even though I have never used the camera, but I have a sense that you can find those quite affordably second-hand. Number 4 is the Sony X100 series, or the ZV-1 that I'm actually using to film this video. I have used almost every iteration of the X100, and that is a fixed lens camera, but it has a zoom lens which adds flexibility for those of you who are not happy with one single focal length. The zoom range is from 24 to 70 millimeters, which is a pretty good general focal length range, and some of the versions have even longer reach. I don't remember how the reach goes in some of the models, but it goes, I think, up to 200mm equivalent or something like that. There is 1-inch type sensor inside of these cameras. The image quality is fantastic, and these cameras are also pretty capable video cameras, if that means anything to you. And the size is tiny. These are genuine pocket cameras, and some Sony RX100 cameras even have electronic viewfinder, and that is a definite upside in some bright light situations. And they also have a tilt or articulated screen, and that also can be an upside in many situations. However, in street photography, I find these cameras a lot more cumbersome and slower to use compared to my Ricoh GR3 and 3X. And to me also the zoom lens adds confusion and complexity. It's not versatility in my photography. I so much prefer a single focal length for my street photography. But I fully understand that for many a zoom lens is more flexibility and whatever. But for me, it's not that, and that's why I don't use my ZV-1 a lot for street photography. Number 5 is the Panasonic LX100 or LX100 Mark II. I used to own the LX100 Mark II when I was a Lumix ambassador, and I think it's a really nice camera. It also has a zoom lens from 24 to 75mm equivalent focal length. The sensor is micro four thirds sensor, but it does not use the full sensor area. It only uses about 17 megapixels of the 20 total pixels on the sensor. But the image quality is as good as any micro four thirds image quality, and this would also be a pretty decent video camera if that is important for your creativity. The LX100 also has super nice analog controls, and it also has electronic viewfinder. Not the best viewfinder, but it's still very practical in some scenarios, like in bright sunlight. But for street photography, at least for my street photography, the LX100 has the same problem as the Sony RX100 series cameras. The zoom lens makes it slow and cumbersome compared to the GR3 or 3X. And once again, I know that some of you really appreciate the zoom lens, but for my photography, my street photography, it's not a good thing. The GR3 and 3X are not perfect cameras. Of course, no camera is perfect, but for my street photography, these are still better than any of the options that I mentioned in this video. However, I admit that some of these options, alternatives, offer more flexibility for other types of photography too, like for maybe travel photography and also for video if you are into video. And of course, this is only my opinion, and I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments down below. And please also do leave your alternatives in the comments down below if you came up with another good alternative other than what I mentioned in this video for the GR3 or 3X. Thanks so much for watching, and if you found this video entertaining or useful, please do consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below for that if you don't live in Finland. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.